This is the almost timely newsletter for the week of June 16th, 2024. Content authenticity statement. 90% of this week's newsletter was generated by me, the human. You will see screenshot outputs from generative AI in the opening section. And if you're watching the video version, you're going to see a whole bunch of the actual outputs being generated. There's a link at the top of the newsletter to learn why this kind of disclosure is important, a good idea, and might be required for anyone doing business in any capacity with the EU in the near future. What's on my mind this week? How to use fractal thinking to scale generative AI use cases. One of the biggest obstacles to people taking full advantage of generative AI is that they lack the vocabulary and the concepts to do so. It's not a technology issue per se. The technology today is more than capable of handling incredibly complex language tasks with really great fluency. But as with any computational system, quality inputs lead to quality outputs, aka garbage in, garbage out. This is the obstacle that management consulting folks like me and all of the big name firms often refer to as the art of the possible, which kind of makes me roll my eyes sometimes, but it is relevant. What things are possible with a technology like a large language model, multimodal model, etc. And while simple use cases can show immediate value and impact. Hey, summarize this transcript, right? Large impact comes from bigger picture use cases. How do you get there? Well, there's this concept in mathematics that helps us to understand this to some degree called fractals. When you look at a fractal, you're looking at a tiny atomic representation of something. Benoit Mandelbrot coined the term fractal in 1975. What's special about fractals is that as they grow larger, they have self-repeating patterns that resemble their tiny selves. A fractal rectangle becomes a pattern of rectangle, and as a fractal grows, it takes on more complex shapes, but ultimately retains the heart of what it started as. Now, that's really abstract. So, if you've ever looked at the leaf of a tree, examining the patterns of the midribs, the veins throughout the leaf, you'll notice it looks an awful lot like a tree itself. Right? If you look at a wave on the ocean, they all look similar, from the little tiny waves, lapping at the crystal sands on the beach, to those big waves, the tidal waves or pipes that surfers like to go ride. A big wave and a little wave, kind of the same thing. In these examples in nature, the little thing begets the big thing. Right? A big wave is made of the same water as a little wave. A leaf, when you watch a tree grow from a sproutling and stuff, it it just is a self-repeating pattern such that the end big tree looks a lot like the little patterns within the leaf itself. Okay, so after that conceptual diversion, what does this have to do with AI? Applying the same concept helps us broaden our perspective about what AI can do. And it helps us understand the power that AI scale brings to problem, right? Fractals are about scale. So let's look at a fractal example to see it in action. I'm going to go and we're going to do this live, but obviously if you're just reading this in the newsletter, that is what it is. Let's start with a single session from Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference 2024 about semantic search and core spotlight. Now, you don't need to know what the session was about per se. We're just going to use this as an example. But how would you use generative AI with this particular session? So let me go find, I made a copy of it. Here we are. So if we look, this is the transcript of the session. Right? It's nice, orderly, neat session. How do we use generative AI with this? I used the YTDLP utility to download these captions. And now let's make generative AI summarize this. So I'm going to start with a very straightforward prompt. I'm going to put it in system instructions. It says, basically, here's how to summarize the session. Now let's put in our session, upload it. Let's change the model to the largest possible model, which is Google's 2 million token model. And there's our session. And here's the results. It says core spotlight, supporting semantic search, understanding user intent, building search experience, content donation, migration recovery, retrieving results, key considerations, resources. Right? This is a really good summary of the session. Right? So we've used generative AI to do a helpful summarization. You could, if you wanted to make more use of this, you might say, well, I'm a marketer, right? I'm not a developer. What does this mean to me? So you would give that as a prompt and say, like, how should I think about this? And it says, here's how to think about this as a marketer. Content is king. Think beyond keywords and semantic search. Focus on user intent. App store optimization matters more than ever. Treat your app description like a landing page. Leverage metadata fields in app search optimization for improving the discoverability of your content in your app. Content marketing strategy, and so on and so forth. So, using this this session, we have a pretty good understanding of what we as marketers should be doing with this app, with this feature in Apple's apps. Now, if you don't have an app, you might want to say, well, how does this still impact me? And it gives you some more general stuff. But this is an atomic task. This is the smallest fractal unit, right? You're taking a piece of text and saying summarize it. It's one of the 7 core use cases of generative AI. Hopefully, you're already using generative AI to do stuff like this. So let's apply the fractal principle. What if you wanted to do more than just a single session? What if you wanted to do all of WWDC 24, which is 129 sessions? Could you do that? Well, yes, of course. You gather up the transcripts from all the sessions, compile them, and load them into a language model like Gemini. Gemini, that 2 million token window sure is handy. So instead of a single session, you could summarize or ask questions of WWDC 24 as a whole, like what exactly Apple's semantic search is, or how a generative AI is implemented on the iPhone, with more details than just the glossy keynote talk. So I'm going to take a quick screenshot here because I need this for the actual newsletter. I'm going to flush the chat here, make sure my summarization prompt is still in there. It is. And now let's go ahead and load all of WWDC 24. WWDC 24 has loaded. This is 568,000 tokens. That's about 420,000 words. That's a lot of text to read through. So as you can see here, 10 minutes later, literally 10 minutes later, we've taken the same task from a granular atomic task of a single piece of data, doing a session summary of it, and expanded it with the same capabilities to an entire data set, to a much larger data set. This thing is gigantic. It is a summary, a wrap up of every single session at WWDC. If you wanted to write a book about what was revealed at WWDC, or you wanted to highlight, 5 unusual things, this is the way you would do it. You'd be able to process this much larger data set. Now, we know that the background technology Apple needs to make its models work rely on specialized hardware and software built into iPhones and Macs. And that hardware has been present for years, which is a point I made recently in an article in Forbes that Sandy Carter wrote. Apple has been laying the groundwork for years for their Apple Intelligence capabilities, the the neural engine that's been baked into the iPhone chip and the Apple M series chips for their computers, really aggressively since 2021. Suppose we wanted to understand the really big picture and what that trail of breadcrumbs has been, the hints that Apple's been giving all along. If you were to download and process all of Apple's AI related academic papers and research for the last 5 years, you could add that to the Gemini working session, which I think amounts to a couple of million words, and ask questions of that. So let's go ahead and do that. I've already got WWDC in here, right? So let's go ahead and add in Apple's academic papers. This is a large quantity of text. Look at that. 1.5 million tokens. That's like million and like 1.1 million words. That is a crazy amount of. So let's say in my prompt to say I want to know how long Apple's preparing the announcements about Apple Intelligence, how much groundwork was laid into academic research. I give very specific instructions, and we're going to hit go and see if Gemini can handle this. I would expect this to take another, 10 minutes, a few minutes later. And a few minutes later, we're done. We have now strategic and tactical recommendations for maximizing visibility in the Apple ecosystem with Apple Intelligence, talking about content and how we integrate our app intents and core spotlight, potentially optimizing content for Vision OS and spatial computing, engaging with Apple's platforms, and so on and so forth. This is a really helpful summary of essentially what Apple announced for developers and how it could apply to marketers. The bigger picture, though, is that we've now got the ability to understand enormous amounts of data by asking questions of it in totality. As you can see, AI can keep in memory far more text than any human being can recall with precision in a short amount of time. For reference, 1.5 million words is about the length of the George R. R. Martin A Song of Fire and Ice compendium, which is the entire Game of Thrones series of novels. Right? And that generative AI has far more precise recall than we do. That's the fractal principle, right? Going from a small task to a large task, while the principles and the techniques remain largely the same. The major AI use cases I talk about in my keynotes: generation, extraction, summarization, rewriting, classification, question answering, and synthesis apply to any task, large or small. But approaching them with a fractal mindset opens the doors to questions we didn't think we could answer because our brains just don't work that way. We just can't hold on to that much data. It is, to quote the Princess Bride, it is inconceivable that we could do something with that much data at such an incredible scale. So let's look at another example. I think we could do something fun with this. Let's talk about hiring. What does it mean when a company hires for a position? In general, that means there's a distinct need, a strategic priority that the company needs to fulfill. Companies have a lot of options for filling the needs, right? They can hire an agency like Trust Insights to do the task. They can bring on a short-term contract. They could outsource an entire class of job to, some overseas call center or data center. In general, hiring, particularly full-time, hiring for a role and bringing on an employee is a difficult, time-consuming, and expensive task. You only do it as a company when there's a real need that other options, short-term options just can't fill. So we know that when a company has an open position, that's a hint about what's going on in a company. If we were to download the job description for an open position along with background information about the company, we could use that job description specifics to infer maybe what some of that company's priorities are or going to be in the near future in that particular role or department. So let's do this. Let's do some corporate strategy work. I'm going to go back into Gemini here, start a new session. As always, set everything up the way we like it. And I'm going to let's start with, Novartis. I'm going to start by priming the model. This is with the Trust Insights Pair framework, which, by the way, if you have not gotten a copy of, it is totally free. No download required. No registration required. Go to trustinsights.ai/pair to learn this set of techniques. Let's start by saying, what do you know about the company Novartis? I think that's a great place to start. Okay, we've got our primed data filled in. Next, I'm going to provide it a prompt. I'm going to say, hey, basically what I just said, which is we know that companies hire only as a last resort. Let's upload a job description. And I have here a sourcing specialist from Novartis's website. This is an opening they have. Let's hit run. It says, based on the provided job description, here's an inference about Novartis's priorities for the sourcing specialist role. Right. And it says priority, aggressive cost reduction and GMP manufacturing, potentially driven by competitive pressures or internal efficiency initiatives. Focus on disruptive sourcing, the goods manufacturing practices, collaboration to justify deviations, possible underlying reasons, pricing pressures, internal efficiency drive, supply chain resilience. Right. This already tells us something. Right? This is a useful piece of information to understand what Novartis might see as a priority internally that they would want to open up this job position from. Now, fractal mindset time, right? What if we approach this problem from a fractal mindset, little things into big things? What if we grab the job description for all of Novartis, right? Could we determine a company's overall strategy from open positions? Well, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and take all of these positions that were listed as open, and there's like 1,700 of them. And I'm going to say, we know that companies need to fulfill strategic needs based on 12 to 18 months ahead. So based on that premise, here's the jobs and job descriptions. This is 739,000 tokens. So that's about 500,000 words, give or take. Let's see if we can infer the Novartis strategy based on all the things they're hiring for. And what we end up with says providing the Novartis job listings reveals a clear picture of their overall corporate strategy and strategic priorities for the next 12 to 18 months. Digital transformation and data-driven decision-making, massive investments in data and analytics. Numerous roles are focused on data science, data engineering, business analytics, etc. Cloud platform expertise, modernizing legacy systems, AI and ML integration, actively seeking specialists in AI and machine learning, including prompt engineering, computational biology, and data scientists. Novartis, if anyone from Novartis is watching, hit us up. Visualization and reporting, operational excellence and efficiency, process optimization and automation, cost reduction initiatives, focus on efficiency metrics, streamlining workflows, customer centricity and patient focus, customer engagement, tailored customer experiences, expanding patient support programs, emphasis on patient outcomes, strategic growth and innovation, focus on new product launches, new therapeutic areas, gene therapy, cell therapy, radioligand therapy. I don't even know what that word means. Exploring external partnerships, building internal capabilities. Right? This is pretty useful, right? We have essentially Novartis's entire corporate strategy because of the fractal principle. We take, instead of one thing, we take a bunch of things, apply the same concepts, the same principles of summarization and extraction and synthesis, and see where the company is going as a whole at scale from 1,700 job positions. You and I probably would not get a lot of value out of reading through 1,700 job positions. Right? That's a lot. But if we want to understand this company's corporate strategy, now we can. And we could ask it very specific things. We could say, great, dig into their specific strategies around marketing. Focus only on marketing and marketing adjacent job openings and job descriptions. What is Novartis's overall marketing strategy and strategic priorities for the next 12 to 18 months based on what they're hiring for? A few minutes later, we have their marketing strategy based on what they're hiring for. Data-driven marketing and analytics, shifting to data-driven decision-making, embracing advanced analytics and AI and machine learning, building data infrastructure and tools, omni-channel customer engagement, including personalized omni-channel experiences, developing new customer engagement channels, building strong customer relationships, focusing on the new product launches, developing impactful launch strategies, navigating complex regulations and access challenges, and building strong relationships with key stakeholders. That's pretty terrific, right? That is a good example of what they want from their marketing. Right? We understand what the company's marketing needs are, and based on that, we can infer their overall marketing strategy going forward. Again, this is logical, right? You don't hire for things you don't need. So we've used this and this fractal principle to expand our understanding of an industry, of a company, right? The final application of the fractal principle, one that a company like McKinsey or Deloitte or BCG or Gartner or Forrester might take. Yeah, you guessed it. Grab the open positions from every company and industry and take a look at where their industry is going as a whole. So let's do that. I have first going to ask it about Pfizer, because I happen to have Pfizer's 1,200 job positions open. Now that we've primed the model to get a basic understanding of Pfizer into our context window, we're going to do the exact same process. We're going to use all of Pfizer's open job positions and extract out what Pfizer's overall strategic priorities are. We have here for Pfizer, digital transformation and data-driven marketing, embracing digital channels and platforms and tools. Data is king. Harnessing AI and ML, omni-channel engagement, customer experience, putting patients first, preparing for major launches in oncology, internal medicine, and rare diseases, building strong brands, and navigating complex market dynamics. That sounds awfully familiar. So what we would want to do if we were one of these super fancy, very, very expensive analysts is say, okay, great. We've got both sets of data. We've got both conclusions of these data. What could we infer about the industry overall as a whole based on these now 3,000 different jobs that these two companies are hiring for? Okay, we have Our results, it says, by analyzing the hiring patterns of Novartis and Pfizer, we can glean valuable insights into the strategic priorities of the pharmaceutical industry as a whole. Here's what we can infer. Number one, the rise of digital and data dominance, data as a strategic asset. Digital transformation is essential. Boy, Katie's going to throw her hat on the ground. AI and machine learning as a core capability. Artificial intelligence is no longer experimental, but essential capabilities within the industry. Patient centricity and personalized engagement, shifting focus to the patient journey. Personalization at scale, omni-channel engagement is key. Focus on new product launches, adapting to an evolving regulatory environment, payer dynamics, collaborations, and partnerships. So this is a pretty good wrap up of what's happening in the industry. Now, if you wanted to kick things up a notch, you might say, well, hey, this is what they're hiring for. What are their blind spots? What things are they not hiring for that they should be? Like ethics and responsible AI. There's a lack of focus on ethical AI professionals, insufficient investment in data privacy expertise. Boy, that is not something you want to see in pharma. Now, is it possible they already have all the staff they need in these areas? It's possible, but if they're hiring for AI people and an AI ethicist isn't one of the positions, probably not. Human-centered design and behavioral science, underrepresentation of behavioral scientists, limited focus on change management. Yeah, if you're doing digital transformation and you don't have organizational behavior specialists and change management consultants, you're going to have a bad time. Beyond the pill, value creation, lack of expertise in service design and value-based care, limited focus on partnerships with non-traditional players, building a future-ready workforce, a shortage of digital health talent, lack of focus on cross-functional collaboration. And so we've used the power of generative AI and its knowledge of management consulting as a field and the pharmaceutical industry, plus the data we've provided in these thousands of jobs to come up with a strategic assessment, not only of where the industry is going, but the things they're forgetting about, the things that are blind spots. That level of strategic analysis frankly defies what the average analyst is capable of simply because they just can't hold that much data in their heads. We've got 1.2 million tokens in here. That's 900,000 words of what's going on in pharma. No human can hold that in their heads reliably with precision recall, but generative AI gives us those capabilities if we think to ask it, if we think about the fractal principle, if we think about scaling our current use cases of generative AI. At Trust Insights, we use this fractal principle all the time. We use it for things like building data-driven ideal customer profiles, B2B and B2C, with thousands of data points, doing content trends, looking at massive amounts of content to see what isn't being talked about, understanding customer experience at giant scale, like feedback from thousands of customers per week for some of our B2C clients, and more. The fractal principle is what lets you take a small use case for generative AI that's a tactical convenience, like summarize this thing, and transform it into a defensible strategic advantage because you got the data, you've got the expertise. You just have to think bigger. The lesson I want you to take away from this is to look at how you're using generative AI today and ask yourself how you can apply the fractal principle to scale that usage. What data are you already working with that you might extend and augment? What bigger picture items could you follow this approach and use? What big problems could you solve that are just like little problems, just much bigger? You have so much data, so much data. You're not using it. I guarantee you are not using it to the extent that you could be. And generative AI gives you those tools to be able to use it at massive scale. We've walked through two really powerful examples summarizing massive amounts of academic paper data and the transcript of an entire conference to come up with a marketing strategy. We've looked at building competitive analysis and industry level strategic analysis from job openings. This is little tasks made big with the fractal principle. So apply it to your use cases and see just how much more capable you will be as a marketer, as a business professional, as a strategist with the power of generative AI and the fractal principle. All right, what else happened this week? This week, we did a fantastic episode on how to grow your podcast. using generative AI, talking about building a podcast audience profile. John and I used the marketing over coffee data to build a series of recommendations and then demonstrate how you prioritize what things you want to do. So go check that out. It's a really, really good episode. Also did a piece this week on why I hired a human musician for my theme song, why AI content detection is a lost cause, and why I don't use generative AI more on a lot of my stuff, particularly on social media. Spoiler, it's because I enjoy writing stuff. Let's see what else we got here. Upcoming jobs. We have AVP of Marketing Technology at Forbright Bank, Digital Marketing Manager at 9 North Group, Director of Marketing at Jobot. We have Head of Growth Marketing at SeedPod Cyber, Marketing Dragonfly. That's kind of a big. Marketing Automation Specialist at Press Ganey, Partner Marketing Leader, Vertisystem, Practice Growth Marketing Strategist at Simplast EHR, Product Marketing Manager at Tailored Management, Senior Marketing Strategist at Data Axle, and Solutions Architect at Thrive. So lots of hiring going on there. Upcoming events, the Marketing AI event conference in Cleveland, the Marketing Profs B2B Forum in Boston, and a couple other events I'm still waiting on some people to finish up their paperwork on. Whew, that's going to do it for this week's episode. I hope you found a lot of value in using the fractal principle with generative AI. And if it's not something you feel like you are good at or available for hire, I'm available for hire through Trust Insights. If you want me to sit down with you and with your team and do some of these really complex analyses and building an understanding of things like strategic gaps, gap analysis, inferred corporate strategy, you name it. AI has the tools to do it. You will also note that I skipped over probably the most difficult part of this process in order to make this episode, which is gathering all the data to begin with. I can promise you this. I did not copy and paste 1,700 job descriptions. Otherwise, I would not be doing this show. Anyway, that's going to do it for this week's newsletter. Thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next one. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you want to know when new videos are available, hit the bell button to be notified as soon as new content is live.